Welcome to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Norris. We're going to grow your leadership through neuroscience, psychology, and theology. Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode number 31 of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited that you've joined us. Today I have alumni pastors of the Red Ink Revival Retreats and Zoom calls and a lot of other of the services that we have gotten into relationship over. You're going to hear all about the pains, the joys, and new tools that are being implemented to win in ministry and in life. And we would love for you to be a part of this entire episode. But before I jump into it, let me tell you about our personal discovery experiences. They're 2-hour experiences with Dr. Todd Bowman, a psychologist, neuroscientist, therapist, and myself as we help people begin to understand what drives them and the people around them. We have a small portion of psychoeducation. We also have a very interactive experiential exploration of people's stories. And we would love for you to be able to explore more of why you do what you do. We have upcoming events. On August the 9th, we have our general population personal discovery experience. Then we have an exclusive one just for senior pastors and their wives. That's August the 10th. And then we also have one on August the 17th, exclusive to church ministry staff. And this is executive pastors, youth pastors, and even leaders of various teams. And if you struggle with addiction or you want to know more about how to lean in and lead around addiction, you can join us for a Driven Addictions personal discovery experience August the 31st. Go to redinkrrevival.com and check it all out. Hey, if this podcast is being of value to you, it would be so helpful to us if you just go and subscribe to it, as well like and review it, share it on your social media platforms. It'll really blow some wind in the sails, and who knows how God could use your influence to bring somebody else to wholeheartedness. If you haven't already, go to redinkrrevival.com, find our e-newsletter, and check out a blog post that I write each month, as well as several of the events that are taking place that you can participate in, or people under your leadership you could send them and be a part of. Right now, during the Corona year, we have everything online. You can do it all through Zoom. And so we would love for you and your team to participate. Be sure to know what we're doing at our e-newsletter, redinkrrevival.com. Let's go now to this week's episode number 31 with three wives, Tina Norris, Jackie Dunn, and Tammy Wallace, as we talk about the pain and joys of ministry, as well as new tools that are being utilized to win in ministry and in life. Welcome everybody to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited today to have some Red Ink Revival wives of pastors on the show. This is going to be an amazing conversation. I just want to say a big welcome to you ladies. Grateful that you guys are here. We've had such an amazing adventure up till now. And so I would love for you guys to all share who you are, give us your name, where you live and pastor, and how long you've been leading churches. And because I have the privilege of my wife, Tina, being on, I'm going to start with you. Tina, start off with what your name is, where you live and pastor, and how long you've been leading.
Well, I'm Tina Norris, and we've been pastoring for 20 years and in the ministry for 30. And we live in the Kansas City area in Olathe, Kansas.
That's awesome. Jackie, how about you?
Hi, my name is Jackie Dunn. I am pastoring with my husband, Tony Dunn, in Corona, California. We've been pastoring a church for 10 years, but we've been in ministry for about 16 to 18 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And then Tammy?
I am Tammy Wallace, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida. My husband, Steve, and I have been pastoring for 22 years, been in the ministry for about 30 years, and then I actually, as a single person, was in ministry for about 3 years before I got married. Well over 30 years.
That's a few years, isn't it? That's
2 years.
I love
It's really
it.
hard since I'm 29. I don't know how that happened.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Well, guys, tell us a little bit about your backstory of doing ministry. And when you were growing up, did you ever see yourself being a pastor or a pastor's wife? And Tammy, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll cycle back around.
Okay, I am a pastor's kid. I'm a pastor's grandkid, and I'm a pastor's great grandkid.
Oh my
So
God.
it's the family business, so to speak. But aside from that, I absolutely knew I would be in ministry. I had a very real moment with God as a little girl, probably 4 or 5 years old on a swing set, and just knew from that age I would grow up and be a pastor's wife. So I absolutely knew it was a calling on my life, not just a family business. And oddly, when I dated Steve, he was an accounting major. So I didn't know how that was going to work, but then the call of God, came on him too. So yeah, I've known my whole life.
That's amazing. 4 or 5 years of age, you had a knowing.
Wow.
I did.
That is wild. And it's just unusual when people hear stories of how the call of God comes on a human heart or where they wake up to what is already existing. It's supernatural, it's powerful, and it's beautiful. So that's awesome. Jackie, how about you?
No, I had no idea I was going to be a pastor's wife. My husband and I married 35 years ago, and his father was a pastor. And I asked him then, I said, "Are you going to be a pastor?" He said, "No." I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay. I mean, I love God. I want to serve God, but I just I did not want to get into that aspect of the ministry." And so when he got called, I was like, no. That wasn't part of our deal when we got married. You told me you were not going to be a pastor. And so he looked at me strange, like, "What is wrong with you? This is from God." I said, "I love God. I serve God, but no, that's a whole other aspect of the ministry for me." And so God and I had a really good conversation for about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks about it. And then I came around, but initially I had no idea and did not want to be part of it at all.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I love it. I love it. Took you a while to get all ironed out, ready to roll. That's fun.
Yep.
All right, Tina, what about you? Did you ever see yourself as being a pastor's wife growing up?
No, I never did. I grew up in the church, and my parents were very involved in church, but not in full-time ministry. So I had never thought that I would marry anyone in ministry. But when I met Patrick, he was in ministry, so I knew he was in the traveling ministry. So I knew we'd be doing that. But I didn't know we'd be pastoring someday.
Yeah.
That was a little surprise, but it's been amazing. So
yeah. So what you're saying is you never thought about it until you caught a glimpse of this wonderful thing.
there
right?
we go. That's what I'm saying.
It's awesome. Well, let's talk about the greatest joys. What would you say has been the greatest joy of doing ministry and leading in church or a ministry family? Jackie, I'm going to start with you on this one.
God is amazing. I love him so much. And he just knows the desires of your heart when you don't even know that was a desire. And so one of the things that we do, we started out in international missions when Tony and I started going to a church that we knew that was going to be our church home. They were heavily involved in missions. And so Tony went, right after we started, a year or so after we started the church, he went on a missions trip. And that's where he got called to be a missionary. Got called to be into missions. And so then since then, he and I have been on the mission field almost every continent and just so many places and just meeting so many people. So my greatest joy is just really connecting with people in other nations and other locations and just really sharing the love of God to them and they're fascinated from an American perspective, how we serve God, because it's so different from some of the way they serve God. We love God, but just the way they hold church and communicate with others are different than how the American way is doing it. So I just love doing that and learning from them when we mission field.
That's awesome. So you went from we are not doing ministry to actually feeling the joy, right? That's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah.
All right, Tammy.
All over the world. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Tammy, how about you? What is your greatest joy of doing ministry?
I think the greatest joy for me is people. The local church is really my heart, and within the local church would be the family unit and ministering to moms and just making sure that the people that are connected to our church realize the importance of family. And so I think people, watching them thrive in who they are and the roles that they have in life has been my greatest joy. Just to watch the change in people's lives and just seeing them have the best life, the life God intended them to have. So people would be my greatest joy.
Oh, that's so true. I resonate with that. Tina, what about you? What's your greatest joy?
I agree with Tammy that it is people. People also are kind of what makes it the hardest too. So it goes both directions, but it's watching life-changing people when you see them, people that stick around long enough that you can see their life and see, their children grow up, to be there, in all the areas of their life, and just again to see how much God impacts them and to have a part of that is very rewarding.
Oh my gosh, I agree. It is such a thrill to watch somebody grab your influence, your leadership, and of course for us, it's teaching, preaching, praying, prophesying. It's all that goes into imparting, and they grab it, and then you watch their life grow. Sometimes I think when people are walking out the door on a Sunday morning, there might be a generosity of affirmation, which you appreciate, but nothing touches our heart and soul, right? Like somebody who grabbed it and over weeks is implementing it and watching their lives, their marriages, their parenting, their businesses, everything thrive. That just is incredible, which then brings me to the polar opposite, and that's the challenge. What's your greatest challenge? What is the challenge that you feel like is maybe the hardest to deal with in ministry in leading a church family? Tina, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'm not sure I can think of the greatest challenge specifically. There's a lot of challenges, obviously, but I think trying to find time to turn ministry off, but it seems to be 24/7, and finding time for yourself, for your family, can be a challenge because people need you a lot, and it can be difficult to turn the job off.
Yeah, oh, that's real. Tammy, what about you? What's your greatest challenge?
People. People are the greatest joy, or people, the greatest challenge is people. I think maybe the frustration of investing so much of who you are and your heart and soul into people, and then some will grab it and run with it, and then some don't. And that is a frustrating thing to me, is the desire, and I feel like I have some knowledge or things I could say, and just the frustration when people either don't get it or just choose to ignore it, or, just the issues that people have. That's the greatest challenge in ministry to me across the board, is just dealing with people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's real. Jackie, what about you?
Yeah, I'd have to say same thing with Tammy saying, is that people, I love people. I love being around people, but it's the expectation sometimes they have, that you can, being ministry, that they expect you to be, hey, fix this. I'm going to come and tell you what's happening with me, and you're in ministry, you speak to God, and I pray, and, this should work out, especially when it comes to when you're counseling them and they have a situation where they want to get over it, but it takes time. And so the expectation that you can fix it for them, or you can give them something or tell them something and it'll be gone. But remind them, you didn't develop this problem in one day. It's not going to go away in a day. It's going to take time to kind of walk through it for you to get healed behind it. But I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to walk you through it, but it's still going to take time, and you can get there. Trust me, you can get there, but it's going to take time. So that's the expectation.
So amazing. And isn't it true that people do? They get into their problems via process. It takes years to get into their problem. But because the Bible's filled with miracles, there is an expectation that we can do some kind of Jesus name canonization or whatever that word is to, magic spell that just brings about immediate life change. I agree. And, even Tammy, when you're talking about giving people wisdom, counsel, you see clearly some things that they could implement and change, and then they struggle to do it. One area that can happen that is, it's just an interesting dynamic is when they turn on the counselor. When they turn, not just don't do it, but now attack the way you're doing it and whatever you're dispensing. And then it's like, whoa, wait, what? What's happening here? And, then you get folks who take you for granted. They have entitlements and et cetera. And you begin to see their own broken patterns. And early in ministry, it can look like, gosh, am I doing something wrong? And it's difficult to hang on to yourself, which again brings us to another question that is, when you guys first, began seeing you would be in full-time ministry. Of course, Tammy, you grew up in a minister's home. You have a heritage of that for generations. But when you originally thought, I'm going to go into ministry as a minister's wife, what did you think that would look like or be like? And how is that different than actually what you've lived out and maybe hit the whys of that?
The biggest difference for me is being a pastor's kid as opposed to a pastor's wife is that element of taking on the hurt of your spouse when they're hurt. And that would be the biggest difference for me, because I knew the challenges of a ministry home. I saw the 24/7. I wasn't taken by surprise by any of that. But then having that double whammy of my emotions and my feelings, and then taking on what my husband was feeling. I wasn't quite prepared for that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That would be the difference for me.
As Steve, your husband, as he would feel the pressure or deal with his own inner workings, his inner scripts, the emotions that swirl, you found yourself as his wife simply absorbing and carrying a lot of those things, hoping that you could maybe, love him enough or be present enough to help fix the problem. And that's tough. And as a man, that's not something, because I'm the pastor, that's not something I have to deal with as much, because, Tina is always doing that for me. So Tina, you're the one that gets to come up next. What about you? How did you originally think when I'm courting you and we are talking about the future marriage? What did you think ministry would be like? Of course, I was a guest speaker traveling the world, but what did you think it would be like? And then what did you think pastoring would be like? And how has it been different for you?
I don't know if I had a huge expectation, even though I grew up in church all the time. So I don't know that I had an exact picture. I think one of the things that I was surprised at, that pastoring is a lot more solitary probably than I expected. That, you're around people all the time and helping people all the time, but it is a lot more solitary. There's not as much room for connection because you have to hold yourself separate from the church people in order to minister to them. And there's not as much room to have other friends with other pastors' wives. There's not as much opportunity as you would think. So I think that probably surprised me.
Yeah. Oh, that's real. Jackie, how about you? What did you originally think, and how's that different than what you've lived out?
Well, because we started out in the mission field, I thought it would be continually being that way, which was we had relationships with people that we met around the world, and we would communicate with them a lot and, go back and see them, spend time with them. And when we got into pastoring, again, it was like, wait a minute, this is you see the people, but you don't necessarily get the chance to connect with them as much because of the amount of people there are, and because of, some of their perspective of, as a pastor, this is what I want you to fix, or this is what our problem is. I want to communicate this with you, as opposed to building that, a lot of that one-on-one relationship and spending time over the years. And so some of them I've been able to, but because I'm a people person, I want to be able to spend time with all of them, and I can't, and I want to connect on a deeper level, but there's, because of the timing and because of the amount of people that I want to connect with, there's not always that opportunity. And so, it's different than what I thought it was. I thought I was going to have a whole bunch of friends and we're all going to have, do church together, but it's more of a relationship of coaching and leading, as opposed to girlfriends just sitting around. Even though I have, within our church, I have a group that I call girlfriends. It's still different than what I imagined it to be. So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All of you are graduates of, or attendees, alumni of a Red Ink Revival retreat. We had a week-long retreat. You and your husbands were all a part of it. And in the retreat, we spend a week together. We have psychologists, therapists, myself, and we do some psychotherapy lecture moments, but we also have an intensive amount of time to inner process groups where we actually lean into the backstories and help make sense of the emotional disruptions that are happening, and even go back and look at the injuries and how they build energy pockets or files in your brains that now then compel certain reactions that you want to control, but find it difficult to control. We have another retreat coming up October 19th through the 23rd. And I would be so excited to have another group of pastors show up and to go on the same journey you guys have been on. We say at Red Ink Revival that driven leaders ought to know what they're driven by. We want you to know why you do what you do. We say you got to know it to grow it, you got to name it to tame it. You all have become immersed. We've gone from the retreat to immediately we transitioned into online Zoom groups. So you ladies are in a group of pastors' wives that Tina and I facilitate. And then your husbands are in a separate group that we meet with online in Zoom interactions once a week. And it's just been so incredibly enriching for all of us. But as you guys have entered this whole journey with Red Ink Revival and have become immersed in what it would look like to know what's been driving you, what have you recently been learning about you, your life, and ministry, and how has Red Ink Revival's principles helped you in that process? I'm going to start, Tammy, with you. What would you feel that would be a difference maker for you?
Interestingly, because that's a very good question. When we initially were coming to the Red Ink Revival, I was excited for what it was going to do for Steve, because I thought, yes, we're gonna go for this week, and he's going to have his eyes open to all these things and how much better it's going to be for us. So I went into it probably with the wrong eyes, because I was looking for it to help my husband, thinking I've got it all together. I'm fine. Everything's good. I'm okay. And then just realizing the adult I am and the way I view even the people in our congregation, the people God has placed under us to lead, is so affected by all of my years of living up until this point. And then to really realize some of the things that shaped me, good and bad, how I needed to view that and be able to see myself through that lens, then to see other people, has given me a lot of grace and mercy, not only for myself as I have reacted to things, but dealing with people and the things that they're doing. Then I realize there's so much more to their story than the little 10-minute version I'm seeing right now. So I think, for me, what the Red Ink Revival did was just give me eyes of mercy, not only for myself, but for other people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so beautiful. So beautiful to see how it grows your capacity in your marriage, your parenting, your extended, the bigger family, and to watch how much wholeheartedness and health and functionality begins to happen there.
Right.
And it's interesting because when we talk about this, we can almost assume that everybody is, pretty got it together, and, there's just little things that can be off here or there. Well, the truth is, it's normal for all of us to have things that are driving us. And I love how you talked about that, Tammy, and I love how it awakened the time you had with us and has awakened within you areas that you have been able to metabolize your own drivers that has enriched everything around you.
In my background of faith,
yes,
there was almost a thing that the theology was the dominant ruler, and that's what fixed everything. And psychology was a very back burner thing, almost taboo at times to talk about, because I'm a believer. I know my authority. I know the word. I've got it all together because of my position and my right standing with God. But the truth is that puts God in a box to think that way. And that the fact is God did make us with emotions and feelings and all of those things. So the psychology and the theology are very much connected. And I think before Red Ink Revival, I had separated the two so much I didn't see how one affected the other. You really shouldn't separate the two. They're very connected.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That was eye-opening for me, Patrick, to see that the theology and the psychology go hand in hand.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And for me, the neuroscience gave handles of absoluteness to what psychology was saying. And then I found that theology is actually has a richer understanding when you have a greater perspective, when you understand neuroscience and psychology.
Oh, absolutely.
The Holy Spirit, inspired the whole thing, all three of the areas of learning. Jackie, how about you? What would you say are some things you are learning recently about you, your life, ministry, and how has Red Ink Revival helped you?
Well, I can say Red Ink has been amazing. Tony and I just really, really love being part of the group and love what we're learning. He and I know both that there are things within ourselves that have been blocking us from going further. And we always seeked out learning and always seeked out training, but it's always been compartmentalized, either theology or either psychology has not been something that's been the whole total package. And so by being part of Red Ink, we both have grown. We've been able to just open up areas in which we know that we're hidden, that didn't know how to get there. We've got tools to be able to do that now. We've been able to share some things with people that have been having breakthroughs for them, as well as the breakthroughs that we've been having, not only individually, but in our relationship. We love sharing with the kids. I mean, that's one of the things that really just for me opened up, is that I knew there were things that I said or may have done to my children when they were younger that may have inhibited them from moving forward, or just some areas that, they had been closed off in. And so by sharing with them some of the things and tools that I've learned from Red Ink, then opening up more conversations with them. And I love people and I love to communicate. So it's been amazing for me to be able to do that. So it's been a true blessing, a really true blessing.
Amazing. And every parent, I don't care how perfect you are, every parent has injured their emotional brain of their child, and repair is so incredibly important. And the truth is, as a parent, sometimes kids interpret the injury as something that hurt and wounded them that you don't even know about. And maybe it wasn't something that you intentionally did at all. It's just that's how they interpreted it. So I love that you're taking the tools and you're backtracking down into the repair and helping them make sense of their journey in their life. In our recent Zoom call, Jackie, you had mentioned how there was an event that took place that normally where you had made a mistake. You don't have to go into any details, but if you just share a little bit about that, I think it's such an amazing story of life change as you're experiencing how you're processing yourself in light of your imperfections.
Yeah, I'm paying so much more attention now to what I'm feeling, what I am going through, how I'm processing information. And so, yeah, my past has always been one that if I made a mistake, and I would just, be very upset with myself and, rake myself over the coals and, figure out what I said, what I didn't say, regardless of whether it's my fault or not. I would take on that responsibility. And recently I had a situation where I made a huge mistake, a huge mistake that impacted not only me, impacted other people, but I was able to just kind of sit in it, think it through, figure it out without getting all emotional about it, and figure out how to work it through immediately. And I was just so proud of myself. I was like, wow, you did this.
So amazing. So amazing. And it was noticeable to others and to your husband, Tony, which is an amazing mark. When I think about how God is restoring our souls and helping us, again, arrive with presence and strength, it's a journey for sure, but it's a worthy journey that many people have given up and don't even know that they could do. For you, Jackie, when you tell this story of, sometimes it would cause you to shut down, I'm going to inject here that in times with Tony, talking about y'all's backstory, that before you were in full-time ministry, you had a professional role, and your role had significance to it. Your income measured out the significance of your value to the company that you were ministering to. So when people hear about you, feeling self-critical and harsh to yourself as a result of an imperfection, it's because you are literally a high achiever. You're somebody who goes after it. And so for you today to begin to reprocess that and love yourself in your imperfection is one of the greatest gifts that God could give us. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Red Ink has been such a blessing because, again, it's not only the psychology and theology, but it's also the emotional aspect of the whole body and helping to see how all of them work together and working through that. And it's been such a blessing, for me, especially at this time in my life, because I have grown children, and so I can communicate with them in regards to what I'm learning to be able to help them and help them with their children. And so it's been such a blessing.
That's awesome. Well, Tina, how about you? What are you learning recently about you, your life, and ministry as well? And how have the things you and I, Red Ink Revival to you and I represents a whole journey that has come into this focal point of principles and ideas. And you and I, we collaborate. You're one of my sounding boards and one of my, peer mentors that speak back into me. So what are some things you're learning?
Well, I think as far as Red Ink, it's been so exciting to see a group of people come together that don't really know each other, and then to get the chance to hear everyone's story, because everyone's story is so impactful to my story. And so even though it's not my story specifically, it's just how much you learn. And then to have process groups, because I've never been in a process group before, so I didn't really have any context for what does that even mean. And I think it can be scary to people, but the benefit has just been so amazing and exceeded my expectations on what it's like to be in a process group with other people and helping them with their story, them helping with my story, and how our stories are all intermingled together, and just the growth that happens in them, and watching the growth in everybody in the group, but the growth in your own self. It's just so impactful. I wish people could see what a benefit of a process group is. There's not really words to describe it without having experience for yourself, but to be great if we could eliminate the fear that people have of stepping out there and going to something like this, because it's so amazing.
Hi everybody, my name is Patrick Norris, and I'd like to introduce you to our Red Ink Revival Leadership Platform, where we offer resources and experiential discovery to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire. We believe driven people ought to know what they're driven by. Odds are you're already a high achiever and a visionary. But what are you driven by? What are your teammates driven by? What is your organization driven by? If you've ever struggled to figure you out, to know what winds you up or shuts you down, if you've ever been mystified by teammates who are stuck in old patterns of thinking, control, codependence, risk-averse, grandiosity, and more, or if you have strived to change the culture of your organization, but somehow the opposing current has just been too strong, Now more than ever, understanding the drivers behind your life really matters. Your leadership journey to wholeheartedness begins with our flagship free webinar, Driven People, Driven Leaders. This hour-long training is with inspiring and fresh insights from neuroscience, psychology, and theology to help you grow in wholeheartedness in every sphere of life. Go to redinkrrevival.com today and find out more. For all my pastor friends, how would you like to co-host a Driven People, Driven Leaders webinar with me? If you want to invest in other pastor friends, inviting a group of your colleagues and networks, we'd love to set that up with you. All you have to do is get 5 to 10 or more senior pastors rallied to jump on with you, and we'll create a private showing just for your tribe. And it's free. Go to redinkrrevival.com/pastors to check it all out. While you're there, sign up for our e-newsletter that'll hit your inbox the first of each month with a powerful blog post, and then subscribe to our weekly podcast at redinkrrevival.com. It's so true. When we think of small groups, some of us have not had maybe the greatest experience in small groups where it feels like you come together and you kind of deal with surface level issues, and if there is any authenticity or transparency, sometimes it feels like there's an inappropriateness to some of it. When we have our process groups, it is amazing how the pattern, the way that we structure them, the way that we guide them, it opens up human hearts, and people that you may not have ever known you would have an affection or an attraction to. Once they enter into it and they begin to open their stories, your heart just bonds to them. I mean, it's magnetic. You just care deeply about who they are. We cry together, we laugh together. And in those moments, what's crazy is the amount of healing that's happening on a neurobiological level. The brain is actually reprocessing the programming. And we've never been privileged with that. And pastors' wives, it is a rare opportunity to have that environment. Most of the time we get together in conference environments where there is kind of competition about, we're all getting together, we're going to get lectures, we're going to hear vision. And then when we talk to each other, we present our best selves because we want to be that person that is admired. In process groups, we have a chance to just sit there and go on a journey together that is led by professionals that ends up just peeling back the layers of the onion. And some of us, for the very first time in our lives, feel the psalmist's desire of God, search me, know me, where for the first time it feels like we are seen for who we are in our imperfections, flaws, our pains, our losses, but with an enormous amount of intimacy meeting us and celebration. And so those process groups, to me, are some of the most amazing moments that we have at Red Ink, and we put them into our Zoom groups afterwards. Well, as a ministry partner, as a pastor's wife, what are some of the greater ministry pains that you've dealt with? And in specific, what I want to deal with is, what are the tools that you've learned recently, and how would you navigate these issues if they were to happen to you today? Again, looking at, we've learned some things. These pains happen. Ministry is filled with pain because people bring their pain into the story, but we've learned some things. We've learned some tools. So Tina, I'm going to begin with you. What are some of the greatest ministry pains that you've dealt with, and the tools that you've learned more recently of how you would navigate these issues if they were to happen again?
I think one of the harder things is watching your husband get attacked and go through hard places, because that can be draining and impactful on yourself as the spouse. That can be very difficult, and because ministry is not easy. It's a difficult thing, again, because of the people you're having to deal with in these situations. So people can drain you and take a lot out of you. So I think learning to love yourself and to be your best self, then you can, the old adage that put your oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child, kind of a thing, that if you're not doing well yourself, then you can't help your husband or your children or the people in the church. And so learning to, the love your neighbor as you love yourself, that you have to love yourself or you can't love your neighbor. So that's been really impactful to practice. And it takes a lot of practice because we don't love ourselves well. We talk so negative to ourselves and we belittle ourselves constantly. And so to retrain that, to reprocess that because then I can't be my best self unless I can learn to do that. So that's been really, really helpful.
And it's been so fun to get to go that journey with you, where we're learning it together. And we don't always get it right. And there's a lot of meeting each other with empathy so that we can feel seen and heard, and then we can begin to love ourselves. And you have been such a gift to me to help me awaken that. Jackie, how about you? What are some of the greater ministry pains that you've experienced, and then the tools that you've learned maybe more recently of how to navigate those?
My biggest pain, I guess, would be seeing women who don't see themselves as God sees them, because I struggle with early on in my life in the ministry, seeing that for myself. And so it becomes a passion for me for women to see the same thing, And I think, we have, as women, we have some of the greatest gifts that God has given, the ability to give birth, to give another life. But often as women, we don't see that value in ourselves because of what we hear from others and things that's happened through our past and things that's happened with, down the line. And so my greatest gift is just trying to encourage women to see themselves as God sees them. And I have learned so much from being able, I've been able to improve myself in doing that even more so because of Reading, because now I've seen how I've grown and seen some of the tools that I've received from Reading to be able to see myself as God see me even more so. I'm able to give that to them and encourage them. And I've seen a change. It's slight change, but I've seen some changes happening, and I'm really blessed by that. Reading has really been amazing for me. So thank you.
So good. Tammy, how about you? What would be some of your greater ministry pains that you've experienced and tools that you've learned, maybe more recently, of how you'd navigate these today?
On a personal level, and this I could almost bring me to tears, and this isn't a process group, so I'm gonna try to not cry. But the biggest pain for me personally is when I feel like I've let someone down. To know that God has placed people in your care and in your ministry, and then, to see them maybe leave and go somewhere else, or just to feel like for some reason you failed them and you've let them down. And I that would be my biggest personal pain, and because it's really connected to who I am as a person and who I've become through the years. And Red Ink is helping me kind of understand that a little bit, that those feelings are not maybe just toward a specific situation today, but from layers of living, if that makes sense, and things that have happened and things that I've walked through. And Red Ink is helping me just to understand who I am so that I can lead better. There is that pain, I think, when as leaders we let somebody down, because literally the weight of eternity is on our shoulders for the people in our congregation, and that's a very big weight to carry. So for me, that's my biggest pain, is when I feel like I've fallen short or I've failed the people in my care.
Yeah. And when that happens, if, prior to what you've learned at Red Ink and our journey together, when that happens, it can feel like you're at a dead end. I have let somebody down. Now what? I'm stuck. I hurt. There's something here that I failed in. Now what? What you are doing now is you're saying, wait, slow down. I want to experience what this emotional moment is. I'm going to ask myself the deeper question of what do I know? Because you got to know it to grow it. You got to name it to tame it. And then you begin to realize, oh, wow, this energy here is telling me a narrative. There's a script coming to me. Where did I begin to have these beliefs early in my life?
Right.
Where did the emotions begin developing so that now whenever there's a moment of imperfection or somebody just is dissatisfied with my normalcy, maybe I'm not imperfect in what I presented, but they don't like what I presented, where does that injure my sense of self? How does that take away from the image of God in me? And so for you, learning, as we all are, but I'm calling this out for all of our listeners to see and hear, that when we're able to hang on to our sense of self and love ourselves and our imperfections, then we can begin to use tools to be able to navigate these emotional spinouts and dysregulations that happen to everybody. But rather than armor up or create these medicated responses that ultimately cause more pain in our lives, we're able now then to return back to a regulated state, find ourselves in peace and joy and happiness, fulfillment. So I love how you're talking about that. I think it's amazing. Well, a lot of times when we read statistics, pastors and ministries wives as a whole struggle with anxiety, panic attacks, self-esteem issues, depression, perfectionism, passive aggression, codependent leadership, sometimes promiscuity, binge drinking with alcohol, illegal drug use, and just a whole lot more. I was talking with a leader of a church planting organization, and he was telling me how that when the pastors and their wives plant a church, usually within the first year, even within the first year of what they call the honeymoon period of a church plant, the husband or the wife will often, in the percentages are in the rise, they will relapse back to old behaviors and patterns before Christ. And so if you were talking to someone today who's struggling right now, what would you say to them? Jackie, I'm going to start with you. What would you say to somebody who's in the throes of some of those things?
I'd say find someone that you feel comfortable with, that you, a good friend, somebody you can open up with and share and be able to be honest about who you are, what's going on, and someone who's going to walk you through and be there for you through the good, the bad, and the ugly, who's going to see you for who you are and be able to say and correct your behavior and encourage you also when you're doing good. I know for women often it's hard trying to find someone who can be there, that can be, that total person. And sometimes it takes multiple people to do that, but find somebody that can be in your life that's going to walk you through that process and be able to say, your behavior is bad right now, you need to correct that. Or you're doing good, you're on the right path. And just making sure that, they give you what you need in order to encourage yourself to continue going forward, because you have to, it's like a child, they start out stumbling, but then ultimately they're going to have to learn how to walk by themselves. And so someone who can be there with you to kind of help and guide you and keep you on the right path and that you trust.
I know for me, that is kind of a vision that was difficult to achieve, because where do I find those people? And Red Ink Revival, and I know that it sounds now like I'm shamelessly plugging, but I'm passionate about who we are and what God has been able to create. But what you guys have in the Zoom groups is just that. And so I think a next step for a pastor or a pastor's wife would be come to a Red Ink Revival retreat. It will be a beginning point to get into a Zoom group. And then that Zoom group meets every week. We go on a journey. We use instruments and assessments and tools to help people actually navigate. So everybody talks the same language. And when somebody does say, hey, you need to think about this particular choice that you're making, it would not be in the typical I'm holding you accountable. It's I'm accountable for you. I'm a partner with you. I see you. I love you. I know you. And the language and the emotional intelligence that gets invested into that space it's beautiful.
And I think one of the key points of that is becoming your true authentic self. You can, if you want to, if you really want to be healed, that means becoming your true authentic self, somebody that you love and that and that can love others.
That's amazing. So good. So good. Tina, What about you? How would you navigate this space of somebody who is struggling with anxiety all the way to illegal drug use and more? What would you say to someone who's struggling now?
I mean, I agree with Jackie there too. It's learning to be your authentic self and having a place to practice vulnerability. And, you know, you have to just take baby steps sometimes. It's not like you're just going to burst out and suddenly you're authentic and vulnerable, but it's like have a place where you can grow and flourish and take those steps and to practice, because you practice because you're not perfect at it. And you'll always be practicing. It's a continual thing to not beat yourself up that you don't make it, but to take those steps to educate yourself and to learn and to grow in those areas.
That's so true. You got to have people, don't you? Because I know that even when I went to work out, I hired a trainer a couple of years ago. And the reason I hired him was, first, I did want to know how to do some techniques so I didn't embarrass myself in the gym. But the other part was I knew that if I had a trainer, I'm now going to show up. I'm now going to get there. So I was really hired him so that I would make it to the gym. And that same thing with our health journey. When you have people in your life, it causes you to show up. It compels you. So Tammy, how about you? What would you say to somebody that's struggling with anxiety all the way to, you know, illegal drug use or whatever? What would be some things you would share with them?
I think that the enemy's tactics, especially with ministry leaders, is isolation, shame, and then thinking, I'm the only one acting this way, feeling this way. And the benefit of a Red Ink revival is to number one, almost force yourself out of that isolation, because it is not healthy to just sit in it all alone, not having the tools, so to speak, to get yourself to a better place. And then my experience in the process groups, about maybe 3 days in or so, I said something, I was like, forget it. I'm just going to say it. You know, just blurted out loud something I would not want anybody else to know except those people in that group, because they were ministry people, and the lady sitting to my right kind of grabbed my leg and went, yeah, me too, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you think, I'm not crazy. I'm not all alone. And you realize you have a space to be your authentic self, and then to receive help, to get the tools that you need from professionals. You know, friends are great, and, you know, even peers are great, but to have that next level of somebody who actually knows what's going on, you know, with the neuroscience side of it, which I can't even begin to repeat back to you, but the professionals you had make everything kind of make sense in it. And it's just such a healthy environment to realize you're not crazy. You're not the only one going through something. And there is a place and a space for you to be all God wants you to be.
Yeah.
That is so good.
That's so true.
Well, we all know what it's like to go to leadership podcast and try to learn. We think that we just need more information often. We read the best books. We go to the favorite leadership conferences. Sometimes we even hire consultants at lots of dollars. And we will come away with these tactical platitudes, the how-tos. We learn about being more efficient and, you know, how to design or communicate a vision. We talk about how to create culture, how to, you know, hire a great staff. But then we fail to sometimes execute on these articles that we've been presented with, and we tend towards self-deprecating shame narratives. And a lot of times there's no real authoritative source or resource telling us why we are driven the way we are and why we fire up. You know, we fight, flight, freeze, why we fire up or shut down, or we move to escape. And when we rewire the emotional drivers, we know that behavior is going to end up following. So how important is it today that leaders make this idea of not just going to the podcast or the books or the leadership modules that tell you the tactical, strategic side, but how important is it that leaders make a priority of learning what's happening on the inside of them that are the drivers for them. Tina, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, I mean, obviously it's really important. If I don't understand myself, then I can't get better. And so I think it's really important to process and learn and get as much knowledge as you can on some of these things. But, good knowledge, truth, so that you can make that change and you can grow in yourself and do better. But to learn things, because you learn so much about yourself you didn't even know, how your attachment styles, how your childhood has affected you, things from your past, just so many things that you may not even be aware of the impact where you are right now.
Yeah. I think about how you often think about a vision. We have a vision, and then we are to execute on that vision, a vision and execute. And so if I was sitting around with no vision, everybody in our traditions would come in, ministers, and they'd say, well, you got to have a vision. You got to have a vision. Or if our vision was always negative, they would come in and say, you got to retool that vision. You got to have a better vision. But nobody tells us, why is it that our vision is what it is? If it's shut down, why? If it's off, why? If we're negative, why? Why? Somewhere there is a root system of that vision. There is energy giving way to that vision. And why is it there? And so we're not at all, even when we keep talking about going to the past, we're not talking about obsessing over things that we don't need to obsess over for the sake of just getting stuck. We're talking about reprocessing and allowing real truth to meet that backstory, so that when we meet that backstory with truth, we reprocess all those roots so that the vision has freedom now to explore and to thrive. So I love that, Tina, how you're saying that. Jackie, what about you? How would you talk about the importance of knowing your drivers as a leader?
It is ultimately important because, as a leader, you're leading other people who are having pain and having anxiety and having challenges. And the healthier you get, the more you can do that, which is what, God wants us to do. He wants us to help people come to his throne. But if you have so much pain and junk going on within you, it's hard to lead people to do the same thing, because there are triggers that they say, triggers that they do that trigger you. And if you don't get healthy behind that, then you can't help them to be healthy also. So it's important to be a healthy leader.
So good. Love it. Love it. Tammy, how about you?
Yeah, I can just echo what the ladies have said. And I think as leaders, we are all looking for maybe, okay, what do we do now? Vision. There's got to be some missing link that will get me to the next level or help me fulfill what I've seen in my heart. But vision built on a not solid foundation isn't going to last. Doesn't matter how it worked for somebody else. So I think getting down to the root as a leader of your foundation, then the vision God brings after that has a solid place to stand.
You bet. Oh my gosh, so true. Yeah. A lot of times visionaries will have these big visions, we'll dream big dreams, and then when our experience doesn't achieve those dreams, we can emotionally identify as a failure. We find that 70% of pastors report ongoing depression and a lower self-esteem. What would you guys coach somebody who's hit that threshold of, I keep trying, I keep leaning in to learn, I listen to the podcast, I read the books, but I keep feeling like I'm such a failure? How would you guys address that? Tammy, since you had the last comments, go ahead and jump on this one.
No, I would say to that person, number one, ministry, life itself is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay. You're in it for the long haul. And I was thinking as you were talking, if it's going to take us an eternity to even know all of who God is, we're not going to know who we are in just a moment. That's a kind of like a lifelong exploration. And I would encourage anyone to get any tool that you could to help you understand how God wired you, why you do like you do, why you lead like you lead, so that you can accomplish what God has truly placed in your heart to accomplish, and realize you're not a failure if it doesn't happen in a split second. We're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, so good. Jackie, how about you?
I would say that, exactly what Red Ink is doing. There's so many aspects of ourselves that intersect with each other that helps bring us down. And to be able to learn more about how your body is working, how your mind's working, how everything is kind of fitting together to be able to help grow yourself. Because, that's what God wants us to do. The more we open up and learn about ourselves, the more we learn and open up about God. And He wants us to learn so much about what it is He has for us, but because we carry so much junk with us, we can't hear, we can't see, we can't move into the place where He wants us to go. And so it's important that you really learn what is going on with you.
So good. So good. Thank you. Tina, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. Both of the ladies, it's great advice. They're just, again, being the best you that you can be, not focusing on all the things that you don't have, like to give people what you do have, and then keep building and growing in all the other areas, and keep, again, being your best self and learning who that self is, and loving that self.
And that's so important. What I think can happen, I know can happen in me, is I have these, visionary ideas that I want to achieve, and then when I don't, the emotional dysregulation that happens, I have to pause and ask, what is it that my brain is trying to create a survival around, or a safety and belonging around with this dream? Is this dream my access to feeling like my life matters? Because reality is Jesus came to free us up so we could achieve dreams from freedom, from a sense of survival, from a sense of safety, not to achieve it. So when we have these big dreams that we're struggling to accomplish, and it's like I can't seem to get the strategy to get traction on it, what we again do is have to slow down and ask, what's the motivation? Where did those energy pockets begin? What happened in my childhood that made me think that if I was smart, or that if I was famous, or that if I had money, that my life would now then be in a security, and it would be in a place of belonging, that people would see me, know me, and celebrate me? Why do I believe that the dream is the access to that, rather than believing that I can have that without the dream, that now frees me up to go pursue a dream from that place of joy and loving myself? So I find that a lot of times what Tina said there at the end about loving yourself, that most of the time visionaries, it's not about them knowing God loves them. Most of the time it is about them struggling to love themselves in their perceived imperfections and flaws. So when they can't achieve or execute on this big vision, well, they begin to blame themselves, and they think, well, if I was just, better, smarter, a greater leader, better communicator, and all of those things then make them feel like I can't be empowered to love myself well until I have the dream accomplished. And what God's trying to do is say, I don't want you to fulfill a dream to love yourself. I want you to fulfill a dream because I love partnering with you and going on adventures. That is not the source of you really being able to celebrate who you are in your imperfections. So I love the way that you guys are thinking about this within yourselves, for your husbands, and really for anybody. Well, when we talk about young leaders, young ministry wives as an example, what would you say to them today? They're just starting out, and they've got these, beautiful ideas. It's all butterflies and unicorns in ministry. And so how would you help them if they were honest in their hunger to really know how to start a ministry off right? What would you say to them so they have the healthiest foundation? Jackie, you want to kick this one off?
Yes, I'd say find some ladies that you have that you feel like you can communicate with, or you want to communicate with, that have those years of experience, and sit down and talk with them. And then find some also that have few years of experience and talk with them. And then also have someone that you're mentoring, because as you're learning and growing, then you can share. And all of that helps to keep you as a well-rounded person, because everyone has a different perspective. And often we have one perspective from ourselves that we think that's the way it should be. And that may not be where God has you going or what he wants you to do. So talking with various ages can give you a good rounded perspective. And then also God can speak to them as you speak to them to you as you're speaking to them also from what God is saying.
Yeah, so good. Tammy, how about you?
As a young pastor's wife, maybe a young mom, I would ask them to bring their focus down from the big to right what's in front of them and say, you got to start with yourself. I agree with Jackie. Find a tribe. Red Ink Revival is a great place to do that, by the way, because you will find a tribe from across the nation that you could probably not find on your own. So you do need a tribe. But then I would say, after starting with yourself, just look at your family. And make sure your family's healthy. You're putting your family first, and then you can move on from that. I used to say I have a flock of 5, my husband and my 4 kids, and that flock of 5 came first. And then after that, everything else could come, because if my life were falling apart at home, I wasn't in a place to minister to anybody else. So I would just admonish them. Yeah, the crowds are great. The multitudes, you probably are called to that, but put your eyes at home first.
Yeah. That is such a powerful word. What I'm thinking of is the importance of being present.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't allow joy to exist because we're afraid it can't sustain itself. So we end up pursuing all these other things rather than living in the present moment, which is where joy exists. Joy exists right now, not if we do something else. And so what you just described is really the breeding ground for joy, that if you're present with you and where you are in your own growth, and you're present with your kids and you're living in the moment, joy exists there. Joy can't live when I'm expecting something else to be the fuel that allows it to happen to me. Right. So it's such a good word. Tina, how about you? What would you say to a young minister or minister's wife?
I think picking up on what you just said there, being present, I think as you get older, you realize how much of life you weren't actually present for. Yeah. And you didn't realize, you didn't know at the time, but I really was not showing up. I was not present. And, if you could only time travel back and make a few changes, you wish you could, but you can't. But with your spouse, your children, your church, everything. So I think that is really critical. But it's not over. It's not to get discouraged like, wow, I wish I would have been more present. Things could have been different. But as I know what I know now, so I can just move forward with that information now. And, I love what Tammy said about, having your tribe. It really is having people who are older than you in ministry longer to help mentor you. And it's very hard to find those people. And so, like you said, Red Ink is a great place to do that. But how do you find people so that you can connect with them and that they are there for you and they know your story and you can be your true self with? It's really, that's so helpful.
I love it. Well, I'm going to shift that question and make it more personal to you guys. If you were to find yourself as the younger you and you now as the older you, or the pastor coach of the younger you, what are some priority pieces of feedback you'd give yourself? Jackie?
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, what we've all been saying is find someone that can counsel me, someone older who's had some experience, who has gone through some things, and then find someone who's actually at my state right now, in which, they're so we begin like peers to each other. And then also whatever I'm learning, whatever I'm sharing to kind of solidify it for me and regurgitate it, is find someone who's younger than I am, so to speak, in the ministry, and be able to share with them what I'm learning. So that therefore I'm getting a full, well-rounded experience of what I'm getting, what I'm doing, and what I'm sharing.
So good. Tina, how about you?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure what I tell my younger self. Show up and be present, like I said. And just, again, put the time in to learn your true self and learn vulnerability and authenticity.
Yeah.
And because you and I collaborate a lot, I know one of the things you've really worked towards is your demeanor and personality is more quiet. You are somebody that you don't aspire to stage, you don't aspire to being noticed. But on the other swing of that, you sometimes have had a challenge hanging on to yourself. I'm very verbal, I have a big personality, and you marrying me, I think one of the things that you are so good at, I love when you talk to ladies about identifying who you are, your sense of self, the image of God in you, and learning how to hang on to that, show up. And I do want to give props to Tina, because I live with her, that she shows up. And my personality, if I had me to be married to and my big personality shows up, I might not keep showing up if I'm Tina, because I ramrod, and then we have to work through that. So Tina, I think it's powerful to watch you in the way you show up without being defensive or attacking. And I think that's something that so many people struggle with, is not really presenting their true selves and continuing the conversation and saying, you know what, we still have to work through some things. And I love that about you. Tammy, what about you?
Wow, that is an amazing question. What would you tell your younger self?
Yep.
As a pastor's wife? I would probably just really tell myself I need to answer to God and then my husband, and not feel like I needed to meet the expectations of everyone else around me, and to not compare myself to everyone else that I see, because my calling and my gifting are not like, Susie, who's the pastor's wife at the next church, or the lady on TV or whatever. Those are their callings. I have mine. And as long as I can stand before God and in agreement with my husband for what I'm called to do, that's what matters. And you can only do what you're called to do. Anything else, you're going to step out of the grace that God has for you. Mm-hmm. And so not to beat yourself up and to be so hard on yourself and to feel like you're a failure if you don't do everything that you see everybody else do.
That's awesome.
So I think give yourself grace, know what you're called to do, and unapologetically walk in that calling.
That's so good.
That's true.
I love it. Well, I'm going to keep with you on this final question. And we, again, all experienced the Red Ink Revival Retreat, which is a 5-day event with psychologists, therapists. We all came together. And there's psychotherapy, there's education being done, and then we get into process groups where our stories are coming alive. We're awakening to where the energy pockets. And when I say that, in neuroscience speak, it happens in the amygdala. You have these emotional files, the hippocampus, depending on what age you are. It is developing the episodic scenery and what happened, but sometimes it's not developed yet, depending on what age you are. So you have these emotional spinnings that have never been confronted with truth. And what we do is often within Christianity is we just try to confront the surface level issues with truth. And what we're saying is no, let's find out where that energy is coming from, and let's sit in that area and talk through that with truth by first allowing empathy and intimacy to be seen. Well, in that whole context of a Red Ink Revival Retreat, what was the experience of that like for you? And I know, Tammy, you spoke to it just a little bit earlier, but let's talk through what was it like for you to come to a Red Ink Revival Retreat, and what were you feeling as you were getting ready to come into it that might be hesitance or nervousness about coming to something that you don't even know really what you're getting into?
Exactly. I had no clue. There was not a YouTube video that I could go look at and sneak in on somebody else's group and see what it was gonna actually be like. So the fear of the unknown was definitely a factor. But then the desire to know that I've done everything within my power to accomplish the call of God on my life and the vision that's in my heart. I didn't want to leave any stone unturned, even if it meant going into what I perceived as a potentially awkward situation.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
that desire to go, okay, maybe there is something here because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So let's just go find out. I think for me, that was big. Just the desire to, like I said, leave no stone unturned and just put myself out there and let's go do it and see what happens. And I'm so grateful and thankful that I did, because the experience was not what I had expected it to be. The teaching was phenomenal. I loved how it tied scripture together with neuroscience and psychology, and so many things came alive in the Word of God that I didn't expect. And then when we hit the process groups, to discover things that I wouldn't have even thought were an issue, had no clue what was hiding down in there, and came out in such a safe place with people who at the beginning of that week were total strangers to me, but who have become amazing friends that I look forward to seeing every week on these Zoom calls. It's just amazing the process that God took me through and is taking me through. It's not over.
Oh, that's so good. Were there any glaring awkward moments? Because that was your fear. Am I going to be in an awkward moment? Were there any glaring awkward moments during the week?
I think for most ministry people, when you go into a small group setting, normally you're the leader and you have control over, you can direct and divert and do as a leader does. And going into the Red Ink Revival process groups, I was not the leader. And so you walked in going, what are these people taking me through? So there's just that little bit of apprehension of being out of control.
Yep.
But you guys did a masterful job of, just guiding the conversations. And slowly, you told us, you don't have to say anything you don't want to say. Yeah. You tell as much of your story as you want to. But very quickly, at least for me, I understood I'm going to get the most benefit out of this if I just jump in both feet first, which is, why I was willing one time just to go, okay, I may not have physical things that I've done so much. A lot of mine was mental thought things. And I thought, I'm just going to say it. And it was met with no judgment, no criticism, just love by the people that were there.
That is so good. That is so true. It's just, I'm reliving it as you're talking about it. That's amazing. Jackie, how about you?
Ditto what Tammy said, and Tammy is so spot on. What I would like to add to that is that, if you go to seminars, you go to trainings, there's the training, you hear didactic all during the day, and then at evening, then you have to try and reconstruct all that you hear and put it together and figure out where it fits. And the beauty of Red Ink is that we had somewhat of a ministry of lecture, and then you had a chance to go and practice that, and get in a safe environment where you can communicate and know that it was going to stay there and that you can open up and be yourself. And like Tammy, I saw real early on that I want to be healed, I want to be whole, I need to open up and I need to share. And it was a safe environment to do that. So not only did I hear, the message and the lesson and what we discussed, but I also got to put it into practice and to help me to heal and open up wounds that have been there for many, many years. And it's such a blessing. And I think everybody needs to be able to do that, because we have hurts and pains throughout the years, but we bury it, we pile on top of it. And you need an environment in which you can find yourself, open it up and share, and be able to see it and see it with someone who can share what they see and help you get healed behind it.
So good. That's so true. It's, again, I'm inhaling a little bit because it just reminds me of the emotions I felt when we were all there. Tina, you were functioning more as a facilitator. You were speaking into situations and loving people, meeting them in their pain stories. But what was your experience like as you watched all these ladies come through it?
It was amazing to see how God put the group together, because it was such a great group. And just to see the people blossom before you and start to share their stories, and how much love you have for people when you hear their story, because it makes the context of who they are starts to make more sense, and you see so much of their heart, and just to see other people's struggles. And it just, again, it so ministers to your own story. It's amazing that it does that. Someone else's story intersects with your own story. And so just watching all of that is a super beautiful thing.
Oh, absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, I recommend anyone who's really serious about wanting to be healed, definitely go through the process.
So good. So good. Well, our next one is October 19th through the 23rd, a Reading Revival Retreat. We do have small experiences of process grouping. It's a little different than a process group, because the group doesn't really get to interact as much together. But Dr. Bowman, Todd Bowman, and I, we produce personal discovery experiences every month, and we have them exclusive to pastors. We have them exclusive, and that would include pastors' wives. We have it for church staff, which would be any executive pastor, youth pastor, anybody who is even a leader of teams. And then we have them for the everybody, the all in. And we would love for people to come join us for 2 hours in doing that. You can go to readingrevival.com and see the personal discovery experiences. They're on Zoom. It's an online event for 2 hours. They have been really life-changing. But if you want to multiply that experience, come to a Reading Retreat. And our next one, that's October 19th through the 23rd, is coming up specific for pastors. We would love to have it populated with pastors, because we know pastors are a unique breed. They're accustomed to doing what you guys have talked about, leading, being in control. It's something where pastors, to be completely vulnerable and transparent, is a very tender area that isn't accessed often. So we've created just tracks, just modalities and opportunities for pastors and their wives. So if this is something that a wife is listening to today, a pastor's wife, put your husband in a headlock, make him come. And I promise you it will be life-changing for him and for you. And if you're a pastor, I just encourage you to lead the way and get your wife and you in an environment. We believe it can be the beginning of something that is amazing for you. Well, ladies, I'm just so proud to have walked a season of your life together. And I'm looking for so many more days ahead. You guys are special. Every week when we're on Zoom calls, just seeing your faces, hearing you laugh, hearing you talk, the deeper parts of your story, just the affections that Tina and I feel to you and your husbands, words don't even describe it. It fills such a place in my heart. And so I just, hats off to you, love and honor. Thank you for being on our show today. We look forward to connecting again real soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us. You might be wondering what's next. Consider attending one of our webinars, personal discovery experiences, masterclass experiences, or retreats. Also, subscribe to this podcast at any podcast provider and YouTube. Go to readingrevival.com to find out all the unique opportunities to grow your life and leadership. And while you're there, sign up for our e-newsletter that'll hit your inbox the first of each month with a powerful blog post. Everything we're building is to resource you to be a wholehearted leader. I'd love for you to be a part of our tribe, and I can't wait till our next episode. I'm glad that you're with us today. We'll see you next time.